Progress. It's something that the human race is constantly striving for. If we're not moving forwards, we're simply sliding backwards. But do we ever stop and consider, what does progress actually mean?
Well, if you're saving money for a house deposit or collecting wool for a new fleece, then it's pretty straightforward. Progress is simply getting closer to a specific numerical target. But what about cars? What counts as progress in that respect?
Take this latest BMW M5. It's more powerful, more technologically advanced and more luxurious than any version that's come before it. It's the result of years of so-called progress, and as we found out on this exact road last year, it is very good. But is it the best M5 ever?
Well, let me introduce you to an alternative. This is the E39 M5, a car that for many years has widely been considered to be the greatest M5 and possibly the best M car of all time. Yeah, big statement. Bite me.
Launched in 1998, the E39 was the first M5 to have a V8 rather than a straight 6. The aluminium S62 engine was also BMW's first to use double Vanos, and it stood out by employing individual throttle bodies for each of the 8 cylinders. It wasn't hand-built like its predecessors, but it was based on what was already a brilliantly made 5 Series that was the perfect platform for a truly special super saloon.
So why have I brought this and the G90 together? Well, A, I want to see how hybrid has affected the M5, and B, I want to see how the new car compares with this, the GOAT.
Okay, so we'll start with the obvious. The M5 has grown, and I mean really grown. The G90 is 30 centimeters longer than the E39, 10 centimeters taller, and 17 centimeters wider. In fact, the old car is almost exactly the same width as a new BMW 1 Series. And don't even get me started on the 2.4-ton curb weight.
Or actually, do, because this E39 M5 with rear-wheel drive and a manual gearbox weighs about 1.8 tons. Now, a 2022 BMW M5 CS also weighs about 1.8 tons. And yeah, I know that's the CS model, so it's more track focused and it's had some weight taken out, but it's also all-wheel drive and with an automatic gearbox, and it's about 25 years newer than this. So the takeaway there is that this E39, it's not as light as at least I thought it would be. I don't know, I just thought there'd be more of a difference between the curb weight of this and a car that's a quarter of a century newer.
But fear not, this isn't a precursor to a case of don't meet your heroes. On the road, the E39 is spectacular, and not just as a performance car. Those 18-inch style 65 wheels are very low profile, 40 up front, 35 at the rear, but even without modern luxuries like adaptive suspension, the E39 rides pliantly, and the wind and road noise from outside is almost non-existent.
It all adds to the sense that BMW has set this E39 up exactly how they thought it should be. I mean, yeah, there's a sport button, but you can take it or leave it. It's absolutely fine as it is, and it just means that it's super consistent and predictable. You can drive it in town, on the motorway, on a country road, and you know exactly what it will do when you go on the brakes into a corner, when you come out of a corner. There's not a billion drive modes to tweak and fiddle with. So different to the G90.
Helping to deliver this wonderful balance of comfort and control was an upgraded version of the already impressive setup on the standard E39. Like the E34, there's McPherson struts up front, but with lighter aluminium control arms, while the rear is a full multi-link setup designed to tame the 369 pounds-foot of torque going to the back wheels only.
However, while the parts throughout this car are generally of a very good quality, packaging issues meant that BMW couldn't fit the more advanced rack and pinion steering setup, so they had to go with the recirculating ball method, which means that the steering feel isn't as good as it should be. In fact, I'm not really getting much information from the steering wheel at all, and it doesn't follow the idea that older cars always have the best steering feel. I mean, once you speed up, it does start to get a bit better, but you've got to be pretty committed to get any kind of information through your hands.
And yet, despite this, the E39 is super intuitive on the limit. Feed it into a corner and you'll experience a phase of roll that, given a split second, morphs into a wonderfully balanced car that allows you to control your line with the steering and throttle. It's progressive yet punchy when you need it to be, and always fabulously agile, far more so than a 1.8-ton saloon from 1998 has any right to be. And while I haven't touched on it yet, the 4.9-litre naturally aspirated V8 engine has to be the main event. With 394 brake horsepower, it is outgunned by today's hot hatches, yet its appeal runs so much deeper than the numbers on a spec sheet.
For one thing, it is properly quick. You can forget that 5.3 second 0 to 62 mile an hour time, because it just feels way faster than that. It really does. This thing moves. Also, just set your expectations accordingly with the gearbox, because like most BMW manuals, it feels pretty rubbery. It's not the most satisfying thing to use, even though it's accurate enough. And also, if you want to do quick gear changes, then you're best off removing the clutch delay valve, apparently, because that stops you from getting the really nice, crisp, quick changes. But even if it's not the nicest example of a manual gearbox, I cannot tell you how good it feels to drive a proper manual box in a super saloon. And it goes back to that idea about consistency. If you want more acceleration, put it into a lower gear. If you want more fuel economy, just put it into a higher gear. And then you know at all times how much forward motion you're going to get. There's no drive modes or hybrid powertrain interfering. It's just super straightforward and so satisfying to be able to have that much proper control.
Even in those higher ratios, however, that S62 V8 still pulls like a train. Change down and that satisfying surge gives way to huge enthusiasm and urgency in the mid-range, something that continues all the way to 7,000 RPM. And while this engine never shouts, there's a palpable edge to the sound from just over 4,500 RPM as you push towards that red line. Together with the wonderful chassis, it's an addictive experience.
Now I'm going to hop in the G90 in a sec, but first I wanted to show you the E39's cabin, because honestly, it's a thing of beauty in here. I mean, yeah, sure, I've got mod cons such as an infotainment screen with sat-nav and a TV that doesn't work in 2025, and there's also a mobile phone that's built in, but otherwise it's just an old school ergonomic masterpiece. I mean, the dials are some of the nicest dials ever created. I've got lots of easy to use physical buttons. There's even a hidden place to put my cassette tapes. Look at that. It's absolutely lovely. And the build quality in here, this car's approaching 25 years old, but it is still rock solid. What an interior.
As for the G90, things have moved on a bit. I counted just 8 physical buttons. The famous dials are now on a TV screen, and the visibility has definitely taken a hit. Despite that, though, I'm not going to say that the E39's cabin was peak interior and everything beyond that was completely downhill. I like Apple CarPlay functionality and the ability to preheat the car if you're using it every day, like you should with an M5. Plus, the driving position is more adjustable and you can sit lower in the car. Although, I'm not a fan of the chunky steering wheel that feels like it's been on steroids. In fact, the whole look of the G90 M5 is very aggressive, very in your face. Meanwhile, the E39 somehow manages to combine grace and delicacy with subtle intent that means occasionally it'll get a highly approving nod from other road users that recognize exactly what you're driving. That isn't something you get in the G90, but if the driving experience is as good as BMW claims, would you really care?
Well, there might be a quarter of a century between these two cars, but straight away you can draw a line between the powertrains, so they're both brawny but quite subtle sounding V8s, and they've both got a good throttle response, although the E39's is a little bit crisper. That thing hasn't got any turbos, so it's just good old-fashioned natural responses, whereas in this it does have turbos and there is going to be a delay, but then the electric motor steps in and it fills that for you. So the end result is almost as good. Almost.
The flip side of the electric motors and turbos, however, is that the G90 is, unsurprisingly, much, much faster. But that extra performance isn't really usable on the road. The E39's speed is on the margin of diminishing returns for enjoyment, and the extra punch you get from the G90 means there's more of an imbalance between what the car can do in a straight line versus in the corners. Although it is worth emphasising how well executed the hybrid element of the G90 is. Where AMG dropped the ball with the C63, BMW's M division has knocked it out of the park.
I mean, this is a deceptively bumpy bit of road, and as I'm sure you can see, I'm moving around a lot in this G90. It's a lot of up and down movement, and it's generally not the most relaxing experience, whereas in the E39, with its passive dampers, it was smooth as silk over this same piece of road. And I can only put that down to the weight difference, because you can try and cover it up, you can try and hide it, but eventually the laws of physics are going to win, and there won't be anywhere to hide.
Find some smoother tarmac, however, and the newer car really comes into its own. I much prefer the G90 steering. It's super direct, but it makes the front end feel incredibly pointy, and whisper it, I actually think there's a bit more feedback. Whereas the E39 has a lovely old school feel in the corners, the hardware on the G90, such as variable ratio steering and rear wheel steer, means it feels so much more agile despite the weight disadvantage.
I mean, both of these cars feel very rear driven, very happy to rotate. But other than that, the handling experience is very different. You can draw parallels between the powertrains, but through the corners, it's a different story.
The G90 is, unsurprisingly, more capable overall than the E39, but there's a strong feeling that it's not trying as hard to be a five-door sports car anymore. Rather, it's focused on being a devastatingly effective tool for awesome speed and luxury. And, like it or not, that's what it had to be.
M5 customers insisted that the new car had to have a V8. That was non-negotiable. So BMW gave it a V8, but in doing so, they also had to make it a hybrid, and that therefore added weight, and that's how we ended up at a 2.4-ton BMW M5. And because of that additional weight and the complication from the hybrid, it meant that this M5 was never going to be like the M5s that had come before it. So BMW effectively had to reposition what this car was about. And I reckon that BMW has done a really good job of that. This is a brilliant long-distance cruiser. It's ferociously quick, it's agile, but what it's not, and what I think a lot of people perhaps wanted it to be, was another version of previous M5s, of the E39. But no, it was never going to be that, because the E39 is truly magical, and it's never going to be repeated.